Good morning, church. We are so excited that you can join us this morning as we continue our household series. I have really enjoyed this series so far, and we are focusing on households and how we can help our households hold together. The thing that I love about this series is it doesn't matter if you live in a household that is full of people or if you live in a household just of one. This series can be helpful for you, and that no matter where you are in that situation, that you can be glad that you came to join us at Church Online today. You can be glad that you joined us because in our household series, we are focusing on relational skills. And so whether these are relational skills that you use within your household or whether these are relationship skills that you can use outside of your household, I know that you will find something useful in this household series. And so this morning, what I would love to do is I would love to share some stories. And I'm going to share 3 stories, and in each of these stories, there's going to be a common thread. And what I would love for you to do is to listen to these stories and see if you can pick up on what the common thread is in each of these stories. So my first story is about Izzy. And so Izzy is 3 years old at the moment, and so we are in the stage of toilet training. Okay, and toilet training, if I'm honest, is one of my least favorite jobs as parenting. I think I just really hate the poop factor in it all. It's just a bit gross, and it's gross when it gets on me, and it's even grosser when it gets on my kids. And so the whole toilet training phase for me is just something that I really, really don't enjoy. And so part of this toilet training is, so Izzy, she's out of nappies and she goes to the toilet, but it's not a completely independent activity. And so we sort of have this this agreement between the two of us that if she does a number 1, that she can clean up after herself. But if she does a number 2, then I need to help her before she hops off the toilet. And so the other day she was going to the toilet and I knew that she had done a number 2, but yet she jumps off the toilet. And so I say to Izzy, what are you doing off the toilet? I haven't had a chance to clean you up. And she goes, oh, Mum, it's not my fault I fell off the toilet. It's the toilet seat fault, that silly toilet seat. The next story I want to tell you is there's not really a specific one in mind, but it's a time when Kaylin and Jonah are arguing, okay? And so if you know me and my family, and if you come to our church, you know that Kaylin is 10 and Jonah is 9, and they're brothers and they love each other most of the time. But if you don't know us yet, basically Kaylin and Jonah get along, but just like all normal siblings, they fight. And so often when they're having an argument and it gets to the point where I interject as the parent, or Mark interjects as the parent, and we say, what is going on here? You see, what happens is Kaylin will tell us everything that Jonah has done wrong. And then Jonah will tell us everything that Kaylin has done wrong. And they quite convenient leave out anything that has to do with themselves. And now one more story, just so it doesn't sound like I'm throwing my children under the bus. And this is a story that happens quite regularly. And it's a situation that happens quite regularly. And that is that we are running late for school in the morning. Okay? So we are running late and we are past the time that we should be out of the household. And I start to turn around and tell Kaylin and Jonah, sometimes Izzy, but she's a bit too young, she gets out of it a bit, why they have made us late, what they have done wrong that now makes me stressed out and me late and all of us, not going to be on time. So did you pick up on the common thread in each of these stories? So that common thread is a word that starts with B, and it is blame. And it doesn't matter how old we are. It doesn't matter about our gender. It doesn't matter about our situation. It's actually so easy and so instinctual for when a problem comes or when conflicts arise, it is so easy for us to blame, to look outwards to where we have no control, to look outwards where we have to take no responsibility. And to look outwards, it actually is something that we spend all of our time and all of our energy on outwards where we actually don't have any power to change. Okay, so when we spend all of our time looking outwards, we actually are using our energy in ways that are unproductive and that cannot bring about change. And I'm not sure about you, but for me, my energy is a precious resource. because my energy is limited. It's not very often that I get to the end of my day and I think, yay, I'm so full of energy. I've got so much left over. If you're anything like me, we get to the end of the day and we think, oh gosh, I'm out of energy. And so for me, I don't want to be spending my energy on things that are outside of my control and things that I cannot change. And this isn't a brand new struggle for mankind. This is actually something that we have been struggling for such a long time. And I know this because we can look into the Bible, we can look back into the Bible and we can see the struggle. And I want to share with you a psalm, and it's a psalm written by King David. And in this psalm, we see that David is looking outwards and he is blaming. But then he has this aha moment. All right, he has this aha moment and he actually shifts from blaming into a different space. So let us read together. So it's Psalm 139, verses 19. If only you, God, would slay the wicked. Away from me, you who are bloodthirsty. They speak of you with evil intent. Your adversaries misuse your name. Do I not hate those who hate you, Lord, and abhor those who are in rebellion against you? I have nothing but hatred for them. I count them my enemies. Search me, God, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. See if there is any offensive way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. So did you catch it? Did you catch David's aha moment? Okay, it's in between verses 22 and 23. I have nothing but hatred for them. I count them my enemies. But here it is. He shifts. He says, search me, God, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. See if there is any offensive way in me and lead me in the way everlasting. You see, what happens in these verses is David makes this shift. And he makes the shift from the enemy to the inner me, right? He shifts from the enemy to the inner me. And this is something that I became aware of when I listened to a sermon by Stephen Furtick. And he talked about how David made this shift from focusing on his enemy, focusing his energies outwards into a place where he cannot control. But then what he does is he starts to search inwards. He turns inwards and he starts looking, well, what is actually going on inside of me? God, search me. You see, David gives us an alternative to blame. All right? He gives us an alternative to blame. He implores us to search inwards, to explore what is going on for us, to explore spaces that we have control and explore spaces that we can take responsibility for. He encouraged us to do this because I think he has this sense of knowing that when we spend time on the inside, when we spend time in our inner world, then our energy is actually used in productive ways and is used in ways that can actually bring about change. So how do we make this shift? How do we make this shift from the enemy to the inner me? How do we make this shift from the outwards to the inwards? It's so easy to talk about. But it's so easy to look outwards. It's actually so instinctual to look outwards. And today, what I want to give you is I want to give you 4 steps. I want us to talk about and explore 4 steps that we can take to take that shift from outwards to inwards. And then I'm going to finish by giving you one statement that you can remember that basically will sum up all that we have spoken about today. And if you can walk away and know that one statement, that you can hold on to something that we have learnt today. And then I'm also going to give you some application tips. And I'm a primary school teacher, and as a primary school teacher, we are taught to cater for individuals. And so into the application tips, I've actually got extension 1 and extension 2 options. And that's what we're going to explore at the end of this message. But right now, I want to look at these 4 steps together. Okay, so step 1 is choose peace over power, right? Choose peace over power. I want to read to you from Romans 12, verses 17 to 18. This is what it says. It says, if someone has done you wrong, do not repay him with a wrong. Try to do what everyone considers to be good. Do everything possible on your part to live in peace with everybody. Right? Do everything possible on your part to live in peace with everybody. Now, I have another story that I want to tell you. And this story goes back to the first few years that I was married to Mark. And I want to share this story with you is because this point of choosing peace over power was actually something that I really struggled with. Is I quite often chose the power over the peace. And so when I look back at this story, it was a long time ago now, probably about 10 years ago now. But we were in the underground car park of MacArthur Square, sort of in the Kelly Car Lane, sort of beneath that near the Event Cinemas area. And we were driving around and I can't remember exactly what we were arguing about. Okay, it mustn't have been important because I have no idea what the content of the argument was about. But I vividly remember this thought flying through my brain. And this thought that went through my brain was, he's right, but how can I still win this? Okay, that's what I thought. I thought, he's right, but how can I still win this? You see, that thought that passed through my brain, it meant that I was actually choosing winning over peace, that I was choosing being right, that I was choosing having the last say, that I was actually choosing the power over the peace. But you see, God doesn't call his people to a life of power. He calls his people to a life of peace, right? And I think the struggle comes is because having the power can feel really good, right? And even more importantly, having the power can feel really safe. But like I said before, God does not call his people to a life that feels good. He doesn't call his people even to a life where safety is the most important thing. God actually calls his people to a life of peace. And you see, what I had to do, back to that argument that I was having with Mark, and when I heard myself think that thing, what I actually do is I actually had to apologize. I actually sort of was shocked by myself when I said, you know what, Mark? Do you know what I just thought? I knew you were right, but then I still wanted to win this argument. But you know what? You're right. And right now, not that I said these exact words, but right now, I'm going to choose peace over power. So that's the first step. Step 2 is to identify and then express how we feel. All right? So identify and then express how we feel. Okay, so the reason why we are going to identify first is because when we identify first, it means that we're going to express, or more likely, it means we're going to express in a much healthier way. Okay, so I just want to explain something a little bit about how our brain works. So we have a left side and a right side of our brain. Okay, and the left-hand side is in control of all of our thinking. And our right-hand side of our brain is control of our feeling. And the right-hand side of our brain is actually the part of our brain that is developed first. And it's the part of our brain that we actually engage instinctually, okay? And so it's our feelings brain, and it's in charge of all of our emotions. All right, so if we express first, then we simply express just out of this right side of our brain. And it means that our feelings and our emotions are in charge. And I don't know about you, but when I give my feelings and my emotions 100% of the control, I can sort of guarantee that I'm not going to express myself in a very healthy way. All right, so when we leave the left-hand side of our brain out, we tend to express in unhealthy ways. Now, I want to read to you a Bible verse. It's found in Ephesians 4:31 to 32. This is what it says. It says, get rid of all bitterness, passion, and anger. No more shouting or insults. No more hateful feelings of any sort. Instead, Be kind and tender-hearted to one another, and forgive one another as God has forgiven you through Christ. You see, if we express first, and if we just use that right-hand side of the brain, that feeling side of our brain, then what's going to happen is we're going to express in a way that's going to reflect the first part of this passage. There's probably going to be a lot of bitterness, a lot of passion, a lot of anger, potentially a lot of shouting and insults and hate. But you see, when we identify and then express, what happens is we switch on that left side of our brain. We switch on our thinking. And when we have our thinking brain and our feeling brain, we're going to express in a much healthier way. When we express, we're going to be kind and we're going to be tender-hearted to one another. And we're going to express in a way that's going to help us to forgive one another. So what I want to do is I want to give you some practical ways that you can explore what is going on inside of you. Some practical ways that you can help identify what is going on. And so 2 ways you can do this. Well, one way you can do this is to create a feelings chart. Okay, and so you can create a feelings chart in 2 different ways. If you want the simple way, the easy way, you can go onto Google and you basically just type in feelings chart. And what Google will give you, it will give you a pre-made feelings chart. And you can just print that out and stick that up on your fridge. Something else you can do, particularly if you have children, or maybe you might really like children's movies, is you could watch the movie Inside Out. And Inside Out gives us these 5 basic emotions. And you can even step the skip of watching Inside Out, because I'm going to tell you these 5 basic emotions. And they are anger, fear, disgust, joy, and sadness. And so what you can do is you can take those 5 emotions and you can explore them and create some more emotions that will sort of explain them in a deeper way. Okay, so for example, you have joy. So joy, you could also have excited or happy. You might also have fear, but under fear, you could have terrified. Another one is anger. For anger, you might have outrage. Okay, so you can take these 5 emotions and you can explore them together as a household and develop your very own feelings chart. And you can pop this somewhere where everyone can see, so that when you come back to this step 2, to identify and then express how you feel, you can pull out your feelings chart and this will help you to identify. And once you know what's going on inside of you, you can then express it in a healthy way. Now, step 3 is to take responsibility for your part, okay? Take responsibility for your part. So the opposite of taking responsibility is blame, okay? And we spoke about blame at the beginning and how blame focuses all of our energy on things that are outside of us, that are outside of our control and outside of our responsibility. You see, when we blame, we actually advocate responsibility. And when we advocate our responsibility, we actually give away our power to change a situation, okay? When we advocate our responsibility, we actually give away our power to change a situation. So when we take responsibility, okay, we take responsibility, we focus on, well, what is in our control? We focus on, well, what are we responsible for? And then we actually focus on, well, what are the things that we can actually change here? I want to share with you Proverbs. It says this, it says, whoever conceals their sins does not prosper, but the one who confesses and renounces them finds mercy. Okay, so whoever conceals their sin, all right, and one way we can conceal our sin is by blaming and actually averting the attention to the other person. And that is one way that we can conceal our sin. But when we conceal our sin, when we blame, it actually means that we don't prosper, we don't move forward, we don't change the situation. But the one who confesses and renounces, right? The one who actually takes responsibility for what their part is and says, this is my responsibility and I'm sorry for this, they actually find mercy. You see, when we take responsibility, we actually create a pathway for forgiveness. Because I'm not sure about you, but it is so much easier to forgive someone who has actually asked for forgiveness. So how do we take responsibility? So first, before we can take responsibility, we actually need to discover, well, what are we responsible for? And I want to give you two practical ways that you can discover, or you might actually help someone else discover, well, what is your responsibility in this part? Okay, the first one is this chart, and it's an in control and outside of control, and it's basically two circles, okay? And the circle on the outside is where we write down all of the things in the situation, the conflict, the problem that's happening that is outside of our control. Okay, so we actually take the time to sit down and write all of these things out and to get them off our chest. But then what we're going to do is we're going to shift. We're going to shift like David did in Psalm 139. We're going to shift from our enemy, or we're going to shift from blame, and we're going to start searching our inner me. And then we're going to go in and we're going to actually write down, well, what are the things that are inside of my control? What are the things that I can take responsibility for? Another way that you can do this is by creating a pie chart. And this pie chart was actually Ryan's idea. He spoke to me about this once, and I really loved it. And it's about when you have a problem, you can draw a circle and ask someone, or you can do this by yourself in your journal, and create a pie chart and sort of figure out, well, how much of the pie is my responsibility and how much of the pie is someone else's responsibility, okay? And so when we do this, what we actually do is it doesn't matter how big the pieces of pie is, okay? I'm not going to use the word always because, I don't really like using the word always because it's pretty much never true, okay? But generally, in an argument or in a conflict or when a problem arises, is that there is actually responsibility on two parties, okay? And sometimes someone might have more responsibility. But what this pie chart does is it actually helps us to go, you know what, even if that person has more responsibility than me, it's, well, I can't actually change. I don't actually have any power in that part of the pie. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my piece of pie and I'm going to take responsibility for my piece of pie. I'm going to focus on the things that I'm in control of. And so once we know what we are responsible for, we can actually say sorry for that. We can say that we're sorry and we can ask for forgiveness. And when we take responsibility and when we ask for forgiveness, not only are we changing our attitude, but we're also helping changing the attitude of the other person. Scientists have looked into and studied and learned that what happens when two people are in communication with each other is we actually mirror each other's emotions. We actually mirror each other's behaviors. Okay? And when we take responsibility, we are actually engaging the left side of that brain, right? We are turning on our thinking. We're not just operating out of our feeling, but we're turning on our thinking. And when we turn on our thinking, this is a great thing, because what can happen so many times in conflict is our right side of our brain, so our feelings, is having an argument with the other person's right side of the brain. And in this conflict, it's all feelings and there's no thinking. And once again, it's this type of conflict that reflects that first part of the Bible verse where there's insults and there's anger and there's bitterness. And so what we want to do is we want to turn on our left side of our brain. We want to think, well, what can I take responsibility for? And when we turn on our left side of our brain and our right side of our brain, then what it actually does is it encourages the other person to turn on their left side and their right side of the brain. Okay? And when we have that whole brain functioning, what we're doing is we're actually creating a really great environment to start problem solving. And this is our fourth step. Fourth step is to problem solve, okay? And basically our first three steps of choosing the peace over power, our next step of identifying and then expressing, our third step of taking responsibility, these are all just really helping us to come to this point, this really great point of, well, how do we problem solve together now as a team? You see, because if we continue to blame, if we choose to focus outwards rather than inwards, and we choose to blame, what happens is when we blame is we take the focus off the problem and we put it on the person, right? So when we blame, we take the focus off the problem and we put it on the person. So if I can go back to that example of us being late as we leave the house, you see the main problem there was time management. But when I started blaming my children, the main problem actually became, I actually was putting it on my kids and I was putting it on them, and they probably all of a sudden start worrying about protecting themselves and guarding themselves and defending themselves. And all of a sudden, no one is creating solutions for the main problem, which is time management. But if we take the time to go through those first 3 steps, then what we actually realize is the main problem is time management. And then as a team, we can come together and say, well, how can we fix this problem so that we're not here tomorrow? All right? So in healthy conflict, we want to keep the main problem, right? In healthy conflict, we want to keep the main problem. All right? And when we do that, it means we can actually solve what is going wrong, right? It means we can move forward, that we can be productive. Okay? Ryan spoke about how this series, that it's never designed to get rid of the mess, right? Because we can never get rid of the mess in our lives. We live in a messy world. And so our households will have mess. But what we can do is that we can figure out, well, how do we clean up the mess together as a team? And the reason why I want to encourage us today to problem solve is because we actually have a God who problem solves. And if we look at the Bible, and if we look at the big story that goes throughout the Bible, this is called the meta-narrative of the Bible. And it's that big story that goes through from Genesis to Revelations. Okay, and this big story starts with God creating us in perfect unison with him. But then a problem happens, conflicts arise, and we decide to turn away from God. And we become separate from him. And what does God do? Does God point the finger and blame? No, he doesn't. He problem solves. God problem solves, and he sends his son, Jesus, down to this earth. And he asks Jesus to die on a cross, to take the weight of our shame and our mess and our brokenness. And he takes that on the cross with him, and he buries it in the grave. And when he comes back to life, he's actually conquered that. And so now we can live back in unity with God. You see, if God just sat there and blamed, we would not be together with him again. The problem would not be solved. You see, God took responsibility of the situation. You see, we have a God that problem solves. Okay, and so in our households, we should problem solve because we have a God who problem solved so we could be a part of his household. I'm going to say that again. In our households, we should problem solve because we have a God who problem solved so we could be a part of his household. So step 4, problem solve. Now today, I've talked about a lot, all right? But if there is one thing you can remember, I told you at the start that I was going to give you one thing that sums up everything that I say today, okay? And so if you want to be that student that just says, you know what, I can just absorb one thing from today, then this is what I want you to take home with you. This is what I want you to remember. Don't look outwards and blame. Look inwards and name. All right? Don't look outwards and blame. Look inwards and name. When something goes wrong in your household, when conflict arises, whether this is in your household or outside of your household, I want you to try to remember, don't look outwards and blame, but actually go inwards. Search your heart and start to name and identify what is going on for you. Take some responsibility about what is happening inside your inner world. Don't look outwards and blame, look inwards and name. Okay, and if you're up for a little bit more of a challenge, okay? This is extension 1. If you're up for a little bit more of a challenge, what I want you to do is I want you to write down our 4 steps we've talked about today, okay? Our 4 steps of choose peace over power. to identify and then express, to take responsibility for your part, and then to problem solve. I want you to write these 4 steps down, and I want you to put them somewhere. And a great place for our family is on our fridge. Put them on your fridge. And where I want you to start is Ryan said at the start of this series, he says, as for me and my household. And so I want you to start with the me. And so when conflicts arise from you and when problems arise from you, I want you to take a deep breath and resist that urge to blame. Resist that urge to look outwards. But I want you to take a deep breath and I want you to go to these steps and go through each of these 4 steps. And then once you've dealt with the me, then go to your household. Whether it's something for your kids you could do. When your kids are arguing and fighting over the Lego, you can say, kids, are you choosing peace over power? Right? Or maybe you're having some issues with your housemate. And you can say, you know what, things are getting a little bit heated here. Our right side of our brains are speaking to each other. Let's just take a breath. Let's take a moment and let's just identify and then express what's going on inside for us. Or maybe you're having an argument with your spouse and it's so easy for you to see the piece of pie that is theirs. What I want you to do is say, well, let's just stop for a moment. Let's just go and do our in and out of control circles, or let's go and do our pie chart. And let's figure out, well, what is our responsibility? And then let's come back together and see what we have. Okay? And then once we've done these things, work as a team to problem solve. And you see, when we keep the main problem, then problem solving actually comes quite naturally. And it's a great place when you feel like, yes, we've made a difference. We're taking a step forward as a household. Okay? So this is extension 1, all right? Now, if you're really game and you're ready for extension 2 is basically about using some of the practical examples that we use today and actually bringing them into your everyday life. Okay? All right? So the first one is that we can create a feelings chart. So go away as a household and create a feelings chart, whether that's just Googling it and printing it out and pasting it up on your fridge, or whether it's going and watching the Inside Out movie and then exploring each of those individual emotions, anger, sadness, fear, disgust, joy. As a family, we have a feelings chart on our fridge, and it's one that I just got from Google, and I picked 2. But what we quite often find is that sometimes the word is not quite there. So the feelings chart is actually just a prompt, and we've become more experts at discovering how we are feeling. Okay, and this is possible for anyone, because even our 3-year-old Izzy is starting to identify how she is feeling. All right, another practical example you can do is start using the language of our left and our right brain, of our thinking and our feeling. We can say to our kids or say to our spouse, have you turned on your thinking? Or is it all just your feeling? Okay? And something to note too is that there's actually a chemical released in your body at nighttime that actually turns your thinking off. And so sometimes it could even just be a matter of, well, let's just put a pin in this for now. Okay? Because it's nighttime and my thinking brain is turning off. And so I don't want to have this argument or this conflict right now when we are just both operating out of our right-hand side of the brain. Let's wait for tomorrow when we can just use both our thinking and our feeling brain. All right, and the last things, 3 and 4, is to use those charts that we showed you before, about those circle charts, the in my control and out of my control, or the pie chart, which is your responsibility, and what is my responsibility. And so I hope that if you are really wanting to get the most you can out of the message today, that these are some practical ways that you can actually bring the message into your everyday life. And now, before I leave, there is just one last thing that I want to say. And that is that, sometimes we don't want to search our inner me because it's hard work. And to be quite honest, it's much easier to point the finger and to blame than to turn inwards and to take responsibility. But there's actually something else that stops us from turning inwards and searching our inner me. And that is because we feel like if we look inwards, if we search what is inside us, we won't actually like what we find. And you know, one of the biggest shifts in my life that actually gave me the courage to search my inner me is when I took my inner me and I handed it over to Jesus. You see, and when I handed my heart to Jesus the first time, my heart was broken and it was messy and it was full of shame. And it actually caused me to want to look away, right? I didn't actually like the appearance of my heart. And so when I looked, I just so quickly looked away. But you see, there was a big change for me is when I actually handed my heart over to Jesus. And when I said to him, I want you to take my heart. I want you to take the weight of my shame and my brokenness and my mess. And I want to acknowledge that when you take it away from me, you take it to the grave when you died on the cross. But I also know that you came back to life. And so when Jesus hands me back my heart, he actually hands me back this heart that is pure, that is beautiful, that is like a diamond. And so when I gave my heart to Jesus, I had the courage to start looking at my inner me, to start searching my inner me. And so we have a team right now, and they're going to put up a button that says that I want to commit my life to Jesus. And what this button means basically is it's saying, well, I want to give my heart to Jesus. I want to give him my mess. I want to give him my brokenness. I want to give him my shame. And I want him to transform me. I want to have the courage to look at my inner me and to know that Jesus has transformed me and made me into a new creation. And so if that is you today, I want to encourage you to click that button, to say yes to Jesus, to say, I want you to take my heart. I want you to transform my heart. Lord, I can't carry the weight of my mess anymore. Lord, and you are supernatural, and you can actually do all of the cleaning in this scenario. And so I want to give you my heart. So click that button if that is you today. And I just hope and pray that when you give your heart to Jesus, that he will work supernaturally in you. And you will have this sense of the new creation that he has made you to be. And because I know for me, that is how I find my courage to search my inner me. To knowing that when I look inside is I'm not actually seeing my mess, but I'm actually seeing Jesus and his love for me. And so I'm just going to finish today by praying for each and every one of us that we will have the courage to search our inner me. Dear Lord, we just thank you. We just thank you that we can come together today. Dear Lord, we thank you for the household series, Lord, and we thank you for the way that you are working in our church to strengthen our households, to strengthen our relationships. I just ask that our households will be a light in this world, Lord. And Lord, I pray that as we go on our journey this week, that you will give us the courage to look inwards, to search our inner me. Lord, may your Holy Spirit prompt us when we so instinctually blame and look outwards, Lord. May your Holy Spirit prompt us to look inwards and to name what is going on for us. Dear Lord, we thank you that you are a powerful God, that you are a problem-solving God, that you are here for us and you are present in our mess, and that you will actually help us to clean up any of the mess that we have made. Dear Lord, please just go before our households this week. In your Son's name, amen.